Well, that was the Prime Minister saying he had apologized at caucus today to Jody Wilson-Raybould over the personal attacks that she faced from unnamed Liberal sources after she resigned as the SNC Lavalin Affair unfolded. A short time later, Wilson-Raybould abstained from a vote in the House of Commons calling for a public inquiry into the affair, and then stood in the chamber to say she wants the opportunity to speak her truth, but that she doesn't have the power to waive the solicitor-client privilege. Let's start our discussion there with three members of Parliament. From the foyer of the new House of Commons, Randy Boissonnault is a Liberal member of the House Justice Committee. Michael Cooper is the Justice Critic for the official opposition and also sits on that committee. And Charlie Angus is the Ethics Critic for the NDP. It's good to see you all, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mr. Boissonnault, let me start with you. A lot of stunned faces, I think, when Jody Wilson-Raybould stood in the House today to say that she wants the opportunity to speak her truth, but that privilege and confidentiality are not hers to waive. That would seem to be a direct challenge to the Prime Minister, who's sitting just a few seats away. Do you believe she must have solicitor-client privilege waived so she can speak her truth?
Well, what I believe, Peter, is that the Justice Committee's called Ms. Wilson-Raybould to our committee. She is being advised by some of the smartest lawyers in the land, and we don't know what the Prime Minister is going to decide yet. He's asked Minister Lametti, Attorney General, to look into this matter, and that matter is being studied very attentively. We can't prejudge what Ms. Wilson-Raybould will say at committee. We certainly can't prejudge whether client-solicitor privilege will still be in place when she does. And I'm confident that with her legal team that she will be able to speak to us.
Let me frame it quickly another way then. As a member of that committee, will you tell me now that she's only worth hearing at the committee if she's been given the opportunity to speak freely about what happened?
I think she could come and speak with us now, and we would have a much better understanding of what took place in this matter.
Okay, even if she doesn't have solicitor-client privilege waived, what do you think she could tell you if her hands are somewhat tied in that respect about what happened in these meetings and so on?
Peter, I'm not going to prejudge what's going to happen next week when she comes to the committee. There's still a lot of days to unfold before that.
Okay, Michael Cooper, you and your opposition colleagues pressed to have Jody Wilson-Raybould appear at the Justice Committee. Do you still think she's worth hearing from if she's not been given the freedom to say what she wants to say?
Well, we want Jody Wilson-Raybould to appear at the committee, but we want her to be able to speak at the committee about all matters. And what's holding that back is the fact that she is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and there's only one person who can waive it, and it's the Prime Minister. And we know why he's not waiving it, and that is because if he does waive it, he's not going to like what's going to come out of this. And look, every day that this affair goes on, and the more we learn, the worse it gets for the Prime Minister. Today's revelation that, in fact, the meeting between the Prime Minister and Jody Wilson-Raybould took place after the Director of Public Prosecutions had made the decision not to negotiate a deferred prosecution agreement raises very serious questions. If the decision had already been made, then what was the Prime Minister meeting with Jody Wilson-Raybould about?
Okay.
Other than to put pressure on her or to encourage her to interfere in an independent prosecution. This is serious.
Let me come back to that. Mr. Angus, on the question of privilege and Jody Wilson-Raybould at the committee, is there any point having her there if she still has her hands tied?
Well, I think what we saw in the House this afternoon was extraordinary. Something that I've never seen in my 15 years of Parliament, where the former Justice Minister stood up and very emotionally but with great dignity said she was unable to vote on a motion, our motion, to call an independent public inquiry because her hands are tied by her client, the Prime Minister, and that she wants the opportunity to speak her truth. I think those are very powerful lines. And then a minute later, the client, the Prime Minister, stood up and voted to shut down an independent investigation into whether his office attempted to interfere with a legal prosecution, which would be is so damaging for this Prime Minister that every step of the way they've taken whatever steps necessary to protect the Prime Minister. They're keeping her under this gag order of solicitor-client privilege. They're refusing to allow the committee to bring forward witnesses like Jerry Butts, who are crucial, the PM's office, and they're turning what the Justice Committee, which had been a very, I think, respected committee up till now, into the personal hand puppets of the Prime Minister's office. So the Prime Minister is doing enormous damage to himself, and Ms. Wilson-Raybould, I think has left us all very much reeling by her very dignified statement. She wants to get to be able to speak, so let her speak.
Mr. Boissonnault, one of the witnesses you've included on the witness list at the Justice Committee is a former Saskatchewan judge, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafont. Just spoke with her on this program, and she says the only way to get the answers that Canadians need in this story is by an independent fact finder, not through the Justice Committee. She's probably going to tell you that when she appears before your committee. What do you do with that information? She's saying you have to go outside the Justice Committee. You need to have an independent fact finder to get to the bottom of this.
Well, that's why we have witnesses coming to the committee, Peter, is to hear from them, and I will react to witness testimony when I hear it at the committee. What I can say is we have two processes taking place right now, the work at the Justice Committee and the work at the Ethics Commissioner. And today's show in the House of Commons by the opposition was again another fact-finding mission. We have two processes that are taking place here. Let's get to the person at the center of the story, and it right now is a story, and that is Miss Wilson-Raybould.
What about Mr. Butts?
We got to start with Miss Wilson-Raybould. We don't know whether she's going to say anything about, Mr. Butts.
You want to leave the door open to calling Jerry Butts?
We have put in our motion, Peter, that as soon as we hear from Miss Wilson-Raybould, the committee will meet so we can discuss next steps. That's very clear.
Well, why would...
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense, other than unless you accept what is happening, which is that this is all part of a cover-up. I mean, we're saying, let Jody Wilson-Raybould come to committee, but leave one arm tied around her back so that she can't really say what the communications were, when she had those discussions, and with whom and when.
Well, we don't exactly know. She's probably not showing up at the committee till sometime next week, and I suppose there's always the chance that solicitor-client privilege will be waived, and that'll happen before she shows up at the committee. No?
If it is, it is. But why would we have to wait for Jody Wilson-Raybould before we hear from Jerry Butts and Matthew Bouchard, who met with SNC Lavalin, who have their fingerprints all over this scandal? What are they afraid of? Why don't they want to come to committee? Why does the PM not want them to come to committee? Why won't the Prime Minister answer the most basic questions about his meeting with Jody Wilson-Raybould 2 weeks after the Director of Public Prosecutions made the decision?
Charlie,
why does he have to hide?
As we see it constructed now and as it moves down the road, Canadians may be paying attention to this story and want to know what kind of stock, what kind of value they should put in the Justice Committee process in the absence of a public inquiry, which the House voted down today with the Liberal majority.
Well, I think that people recognize that you need to get this an independent inquiry, because then that would allow Ms. Wilson-Raybould to freely speak. That would then be able to get the testimony from the Prime Minister's office, but we're not getting that. I doubt any Canadian would bet any money that the Liberals on the Justice Committee will put the Canadian interest first, given the farce that they turned the committee in over the last 2 weeks. I wasn't in those closed camera meetings, but I know what went into those meetings was a clear witness list to get answers, and what came out of them was very prescribed and very protective of the Prime Minister. So Canadians shouldn't put much stock in this. And the fact that Jerry Butts hightailed it out of there, and the Prime Minister then said that that would give Jerry Butts the chance to defend himself, but he's not being called to speak, is turning this into a very ridiculous matter, which I think is very corrosive for the credibility of this Prime Minister. So my call to the Prime Minister is stop doing this ad hoc, make up a different answer every single day routine, and come clean. Tell us who in the office spoke with SNC. Was there pressure put on to monkey wrench that legal investigation? That's the question.
A couple of minutes left to finish on this. Mr. Boissonnault, let me go to you. Mr. Cooper touched on it. We have media reports now that are based on court documents showing the Prime Minister met with Jody Wilson-Raybould 2 weeks after the Director of Public Prosecutions had decided to proceed with criminal charges against SNC Lavalin. Do Canadians have the right to know what was said at that meeting and what role that conversation may have played in the allegations of political pressure in a criminal investigation? And if they do, how will they know it?
Well, look, there's an ethics investigation that the Ethics Commissioner is undertaking into these conversations, and let's be clear, Peter. Let's be clear. It is a normal course of...
Isn't his mandate to see whether anybody took actions as a public office holder to further their own
It's a normal course of business. It's a normal course of business for people in the PMO to talk with people in the Attorney General's office. The order of this, does it matter if you're trying to create a fictional scandal? Sure.
Well, it might be important since the conversation took place after the decision to prosecute had been made.
But has anything anything changed in that? No.
Yeah.
The company is still going to go to court. There is no smoking gun here. There's nothing to say that anything untoward took place.
Look,
it's a normal course of business for the PMO and the AG to have conversations, vigorous conversations.
I understand that's your view. How does that view get put to scrutiny? How do you independently look at that and say, let's see what these conversations were. Look, it turns out they talked about this. It's all innocent. Do Canadians have the right to know that? Or is that the kind of conversation that needs to be protected?
We will start with Ms. Wilson-Raybould at committee, and then we will determine next steps. Okay. That's how we'll get more information.
Mr. Cooper?
I don't know how Randy can say there's nothing to see here, but it changes nothing. It changes everything. Look, the Prime Minister said, and was very careful in saying, that he told former Attorney General Wilson-Raybould that this was her decision to make. And now we find out that the decision had already been made. So what was the Prime Minister talking to Minister Wilson-Raybould about? We need answers.
Charlie Angus, a final word to you on this whole issue of getting at those kinds of answers.
Well, quite simply, my Liberal colleague now says it's a fictional scandal. Well, is it fictional that Ms. Wilson-Raybould went in today and said that she is not being allowed to speak and she wants to speak truth to power? Is it fictional that the right-hand man, the creator of the Sunny Ways Revolution, has had to hightail it out of the PMO's office because the house is on fire? That's not fictional. Those are the facts. And the other fact is that we now know that the Prime Minister spoke to Ms. Wilson-Raybould after the independent public prosecution decided that they were not going to give the free get-out-of-jail card to SNC Lavalin. So the Prime Minister needs to tell us what was in that conversation. Was that an attempt to interfere with her? And was that the reason that she has left under a very dignified cloud on her part, but a very dark cloud on the Prime Minister's?
Okay, lots to discuss. We could go on, I'm sure, but we'll have a chance to follow up, I'm sure, in the days ahead. Thank you all, gentlemen, for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you so
Thanks,
much.
Peter.
And one other note.